because it was like, Jesus Christ, what's this? What's this? This black woman in front of me, big breasts, small waist, big ass, big mama, and she's gone from the church covering her up in a gown, which is what they used to do. They would put her in a gown because it would cover up a Rubenesque figure. Because when she would move, you know, she's giving it the... She was moving and everything was... So her breasts were going from left to right. The hips were swinging from left to right in opposite directions. And she was a big, beautiful, Rubenesque, lovely voice coming out of this dark, gorgeous woman.
Welcome to the Creative Condition podcast, the show where I, Ben Tallon, illustrator and writer, invite people from the creative industry and far beyond to share their story of creativity, both the nature and the nurture, the chaos and the calm. Creativity is a fundamental pillar of human happiness, something I'm increasingly fascinated by. It is so often misunderstood. So little by little, I hope to build an archive of valuable stories, experiences and tips to help you maximise yours. Today I'm chatting to Sarah Brown, an incredible vocalist with the likes of Simple Minds, Duran Duran, Roxy Music, Stevie Wonder and many, many more. Sarah is letting her in her adoration of Mahalia Jackson and her upcoming tribute album to the Queen of Gospel. It's an immensely powerful, inspiring, uplifting conversation with an incredible person. But first, a little thank you to the kind supporters of the show. Founding sponsor and absolutely crucial supporters, illustrationx.com. Fantastic illustration agency supporting a whole broad range of animators, illustrators, mural artists, street artists, fashion designers, lettering specialists, you name it. They've got them all. Check them out now at illustrationx.com. We provide an industry insight every single time, and I'm going to give my own little tip this time, and I think it's about comparison, the thief of joy. So often now in today's environment and today's creative industry, I see people comparing themselves and doubting themselves at crazy early stages and not affording themselves the time to just relax, enjoy and understand and live with their own creativity for a little while, work out where it fits in the world. I think there's nothing wrong with getting a job, full-time, part-time, doesn't matter what it is, washing dishes, working in a bank. I think if there's something you can do that's in structured hours that gives you plenty of free time to work on your creativity, do it. There's no rush. There's no failure in that whatsoever. I've worked in countless jobs in factories, in filing, in data, and none of it was particularly glamorous or exciting, but it paid the bills. It enabled me the freedom to not make rash decisions and crack on. And because of that, I created purely in accordance with what I was feeling, what I was into, what I was passionate, what was going on in the world around me. And I was able to carve out a very distinct style that could only be my own. And yeah, it's going to fall foul of trends at times, but more importantly, there's always going to be a place for it. So I just wanted to pass that on because today's guest, Sarah Brown, illustrates that in an emphatic fashion. And she talks about how she spent so long toiling in her own kind of fragility and lack of confidence for various reasons, as we'll get deep into. So I hope it's going to be a really scintillating, valuable, sizzling conversation that really drives home that message. And that's courtesy of illustrationx.com. Very kindly also the AOI.com are very often supporters of this show. Go and check them out, the Association of Illustrators, supporting the illustration industry with a broad range of industry events, business support and creative advice. You name it, they do it. Go and check them out, the AOI.com. So welcome back. How are you doing? How have you been? I hope you're well. I hope you've been staying creative and getting on with life in these crazy turbulent times. If it's not pandemics, it's politicians having parties during pandemics. If it's not politicians having parties during pandemics, it's the same damn government cutting higher education creative course funding by 50%. Don't get me started. I hope you're well. I hope you're not letting all this toxicity on Twitter and everywhere else haul you down, because there's also really good stuff in all those places. And there's goodness in the world and it's out there and it's going on. So focus on it. And yeah, I hope you're good. So today's podcast is an interesting one. We will get into it in more depth shortly. But it's been in the can for about 3 years, this conversation. And it's kind of timeless, so I knew it would always come good at some point. But because of COVID, I had to very challengingly bide my time because it's one of the most powerful conversations I've ever had the pleasure of taking part in. So I had to sit on this. We'll get into into depth with that shortly. So what's been going on in your world? Let me know. I had a lot of correspondence going on in the week. There's been a couple of things. So I had this piece in Creative Review, and it was about focus. So the first Monday back after Christmas, I came back into the studio, which currently for me is a spare room in Salisbury, where I've recently moved to from Manchester. And I don't get on too well with the whole spare room working thing, if I'm honest. I need either an external studio space, I need to be in a cafe, or I need to be in some kind of dedicated space where I can walk in through the door, close it behind me, and let loose, whether it's inks, words, just sitting there and getting inspired. That's what I need personally. So I started to write about my lack of focus on that day and how I spent an entire Monday very scatterbrained, flitting from insignificant task to insignificant task, to LinkedIn, to Twitter, to Instagram, to my email, and back, all around that turgid loop. And what kind of happens with these things is, I think when I share these things that are heartfelt or emotional, it's interesting, but there always seems to be someone who's watching at the right time and picks it up. And I was able to get this piece picked up for Creative Review, so that's out there now. It's about focus and creativity and the importance of clearing the mind so that you're able to either concentrate on drawing the task at hand, making something, or just freeing up your mind so that it is blank and that you might be inspired. And when you get inspired to do a certain thing, you can entirely focus your energies on that. And it's just a very interesting topic, so you can go and have a look at that now. You'll see it on my Twitter, or you can just search Creative Review Ben Tallon. I'm sure it'll pop up there. They've got a great SEO, great website over there, because they're a fantastic bunch of people doing cool things. So that's something you can go and have a look at now. So again, it's been a little gap, like I said, since the last episode with Laura Hope. I hope you enjoyed that one. I thought it was a fantastic conversation about changing direction. In Laura's case, there were a lot of realizations during COVID. I think a lot of you guys will be familiar with that. And I got some great feedback on the episode. So go back and listen to that now. Like I said, there are going to be longer gaps. I'm doing this more sporadic now as and when the opportunities come up. That said, there are a couple of episodes in waiting that I think are going to blow your socks off. So I hope it won't be so long next time. But believe me, Sarah Brown today is worth the wait. So the creative condition isn't going anywhere. Just like I said, it's going to be bigger gaps in between. What else? So I have been working on my new fiction book, which is going to be coming out on the 7th of April. So it's called Stories for the Apocalypse, Notes on the New Normal. It's very much a zeitgeist, kind of tapping into this feeling that we're all a little anxious, we're all on the brink. There's a lot of people spiraling into madness. And the irony was, when I named this whole project Stories for the Apocalypse, it was long before COVID. I felt like there was already a sentiment of people just crackling like a loose wire, just ready to fizz. I think the pace of life now and the stress that we're all exposed to, and the demands on us day to day, and the kind of imposter syndrome and the comparison that's going on out there, and the celebrity culture and all these things to be seen, to be doing, and all this technology we have at our fingertips now, there's less time than ever for chilling out and relaxing. And I think that people were, falling into this kind of mania that I was seeing going on left, right and centre. So particularly post-COVID, this book is very, very relevant, and it's right on the barrier between horror, kind of a suburban horror, and dark comedy, which is what it is. There's a lot of laughs in there, but it's also quite grotesque, and it's very much looking at the way people cope and capitulate in equal measure in these times that we live in. So that's going to be coming out on April 7th. It's going to be an ebook and audiobook format for the time being, and the plan is with Stories for the Apocalypse that there's going to be volumes of 7 or 8 stories released as an audiobooks, build into this big paperback, all singing, all dancing volume of, let's say, 30 stories when the time comes. So I'm very excited about that. You may have seen the images that I've been sharing around of me under a ghost sheet, very warped, up in the woods in Lancashire before I left that neck of the country. I had a lot of fun doing that photo shoot with Danny Allison, and I wanted to get that idea across there. There is spookiness, there is body horror, there is psychological horror going on in these books, but it's also anchored very much to the real world and suburban horror and what's going on around us. And I was fortunate enough to get a lovely endorsement quote for the front cover from Charlie Adlard, who you may have listened to on the podcast, who was the artist for the comic books in The Walking Dead. And that was a huge thrill to get Charlie to look at the stories and bring me some feedback. So keep an eye on the social media at Ben Tallon. You're going to be seeing all that stuff coming up soon. I'm going to be slow releasing book covers and video trailers and quotes from people who said very kind things about the stories. But it's going to be out there. It's going to be very affordable. It's going to be an ebook and audiobook, and I think you're really going to enjoy this if you've got the dark sense of humour that I do, or even a modicum of that. So get your feedback at the same address at Ben Tallon on social media. Drop me an email, hello@bentallon.com. If you've been up to something cool, give me a nudge. Let me know. Tell me about it. At worst, I'll probably retweet it and give some feedback. At best, maybe there's an episode for the podcast waiting to happen. Who knows? I also, before we move on to Sarah, just wanted to mention there was a big Twitter thread that went off in the week, and I'm not used to this happening. I'm kind of used to popping stuff out there and getting about 1 or 2 likes and then, tumbleweed after that. But I shared a piece which was talking about the value of our industry, the creative industries, to the UK economy, which comes in a whopping 117 billion according to stats in 2019. And that represents 6% of the entire economy overall, which was up 43% from 2010. So that's a huge expansion of our industry. And guess what? The government cut the funding to higher education creative courses by 50%. It's beggars belief, isn't it? So it makes you kind of go, what? We're talking the language, we're bringing money into the country. What is this? So I tweeted about it and I posted a long thread which comes from my new non-fiction book, which may not be out for a little while yet, but I'm very much working on it full steam ahead now, which I've been trying to do for about 7 years since Champagne and Wax Crayons came out. And it's finally moving, it's finally alive. It's going to be a challenging work because it's entirely different to Champagne and Wax Crayons. It's going to be non-fiction again. It's going to be called The Creative Condition, just like this podcast. And it's going to be a massive exploration of exactly that, the creative condition. So creativity and the human condition. All the facets of creativity and how it behaves, looked at through the prism of a number of guests from the show and a lot of other people who I've encountered both in and outside the creative industry. I think you're really going to love that book. So I'll be releasing excerpts and updates on that as it moves along, and then release dates in due course. But there was a thread that just kicked off. I think people felt really passionately, just like I did, about the cuts to the funding for the arts and how preposterous and damaging that is for mental health, for society in general, for young people, for our industry ultimately too. And it deep dives into the reasons for that. So I would love to keep that moving. So again, I've pinned that at the top of my Twitter at Ben Tallon. Love you to go and take a look and get me some feedback on that. Well, that's enough about me. That's enough of the business stuff. Another quick thank you to the sponsors, theAOI.com and illustrationx.com, before we move on to this lady. So, Sarah Brown. So Sarah is a wonderful vocalist from London, and she's been singing for years, and her singing voice is absolutely spellbinding. It's something else. I met Sarah in 2019 through Andrew Cotterill, who you may remember I was working with on a collaborative exhibition called Lend Me Your Ear. So Lend Me Your Ear was a photography and illustration collaboration. Andrew's been photographing for over 30 years now, the who's who of music for the likes of Mojo and Q and Sony Music and all kinds of album covers and all that. And he's a wonderful, warm person. And I met Sarah through Andy when we were putting our exhibition on. So Sarah sings a lot with Simple Minds. We'll get into her career story in a moment, but she sings with like Simple Mind and Pink Floyd and George Michael and many, many more. And so I met her back then, and we got talking about Sarah's upcoming project, which is what we're covering today. And Sarah has this lifelong affiliation with Mahalia Jackson, and she told me about this, and to my shame I wasn't totally aware of Mahalia Jackson beyond a vague recognition of the name. So she's going to tell us all about the life of Mahalia Jackson, and the reason the podcast is out today is that it's 50 years since Mahalia's passing, a real loss for the world. And it's an upcoming tribute album to who's commonly known as the Queen of Gospel. And it's one of the most uplifting, powerful conversations I ever had. And I just think there was synchronicity and timing. And, this was a hugely creative environment around our exhibition. And once Sarah and I started to have a chat about this, and I saw Sarah's eyes light up, I saw her aura glowing. There was just a real crackle and an energy about her, and she was just so switched on and turned on about Mahalia Jackson that I just said, look, would you be prepared to have this conversation with me for this podcast that I do? Because I think my listeners would be blown away by what we're talking about here. So that's what we're going to bring you today. I've had to wait for 3 years because of COVID and the delay to the album, which is Sarah Brown sings Mahalia Jackson, does what it says in the tin. And it's more than worth the wait because it was a very timeless conversation. And here we are now off the back of COVID, hopefully sometime soon at least. And Sarah is able to now complete and release the album. So the first single, I'm On My Way, is out today on the 27th of January. Go and listen to it and be blown away. You're going to get a little teaser of Sarah's voice in this very podcast. But going from Sarah's website is a little biography to give you a little bit more in-depth insight. So from her appearances on records with the likes of Pink Floyd, George Michael, Stevie Wonder and Simply Red, plus tours with Roxy Music, Simple Minds and Duran Duran, the English-born singer is one of the most prolific, in-demand vocalists in the world. Sarah first discovered her singing voice as a child growing up in Aylesbury, the small market town northwest of London, where she listened to her parents' record collection, particularly discs by Mahalia Jackson and Jim Reeves. I was singing along and found it was quite easy, she remembers with a laugh. It was much easier than writing an essay at school. From a very young age, she was encouraged to perform at her local Pentecostal church, where she encountered a host of inspiring guitar-playing women in the mould of US gospel legend Sister Rosetta Tharpe. The church was where I got my training, she says. It was drums, guitars and bass, Hammond organ, proper soul music and blues. Lots of clapping, lots of shouting, rolling in the aisles. It was full of passion. In her teenage years, Sarah also learned the healing powers of singing, helping to recover from her parents' breakup when she was only 14. Moving to Luton with her mother, she hooked up with a church that had affiliations in London, where her talents saw her being invited to join the inspirational choir of the Pentecostal Firstborn Church of the Living God. The choir was the first ever to be signed to a major label, CBS Records, releasing their debut album, Sweet Inspiration, in 1985, performing concerts around the world and appearing before the Queen in London on Madness's #2 UK hit Wings of a Dove. As one of its lead singers, Sarah Brown went on to sing with the choir for 10 years, while at the same time being spotted by Stevie Wonder led her to embark upon a parallel career as a session singer. The very important skill that I learned from the choir, she says, was just knowing how to listen to the voice you're working with and placing my tone with their tone. It was an approach that was to serve her very well throughout the 90s and beyond, firstly as one of the key singers of UK funk band Incognito, and then trumpeter James Macmillan in the jazz duo Lush Life, whose 1996 album Let Somebody Love You yielded a #1 single in Japan, and on through her live and recorded work with Simply Red. Through her singing with the latter, she was invited to audition for Roxy Music's reunion tour in 2001. The audition was absolutely amazing, she remembers. I turned up not having done any research or having really any understanding about Roxy Music. I had a big afro, jeans, t-shirt. Brian Ferry loved it, and then I started singing. I knew I'd got the gig. As I was singing, he came down and lay on the floor by the mic and put his hands up behind his head and just started smiling. I was the last girl to be seen, and that gig changed my life. Her onstage performances with Roxy Music also brought her to the attention of both Simple Minds and Duran Duran. Despite the fact that it took her 3 phone messages from the former singer Jim Kerr before she could decipher his Scottish accent and call him back. The latter's Simon Le Bon, meanwhile hired her over the phone. Later, she was to be invited by Pink Floyd singer-guitarist David Gilmour to sing on the title track of the band's farewell album, The Endless River. Sarah Brown has now been a member of Simple Minds for close to 10 years, recording and travelling the world with the group. She feels that there's something special about the vocal bond she shares with Jim Kerr. Going back to the choir, she says, I think it's just understanding Jim's voice and the type of colour that he needs to weave in and out. He's an amazing singer, and he doesn't need much. Just a little colour here and there. So Sarah Brown sings Mahalia Jackson. That's the project we're going to be talking about today. What were the origins of that? So Sarah says, the seed for the album was planted back some 20 plus years ago when I was singing backing vocals on the Roxy Music reunion tour. Waiting for soundcheck, I stood on the stage as Roxy's pianist Colin Good was warming up on an old blues tune by Ma Rainey. And as he played, I was immediately transported back to when I was 8 and in church on a Sunday, and these matriarchal figures, these big black mamas dressed like Audrey Hepburn, were bellowing out their Mahalia Jackson hymns, and they were crying out from their very souls. And as I listened to Colin, I was crying too, lost in the music, and I'd vowed I'd pay my own homage to Mahalia one day. So I really do hope this conversation brings you even a percentage of the joy and inspiration that it gave me when we had it back in 2019. Sarah's life is not a simple one. It's a very, very wavy, weavy, up and down, powerful life full of lessons. And I'm just so excited to see this project come out. So get us your feedback over at Ben Tallon on the social media. And without further ado, let's get to it.
The amount of projects that I've started and just got bored with, and so not completed it. And I thought to myself, you know what? I want to complete this. And even if it does not sell to anyone other than my mother, I am so proud. I'm over it. I'm over worrying about who that marketplace is going to be and how successful it will be, because for me the success is the completion of the project.
I'm excited to hear about your own approach to that astounding
Yes.
life and career.
Yes.
But I mean, let's just go back a little bit. I'd love to hear about people's childhoods a little bit, and what were the earliest inclinations that you had this spark, this creativity in you that led you to music. And is there any early conscious moments?
I think that yes, I'd be lying if I said no. I was brought up very in church. I was brought up Black Pentecostal. Most Caribbeans had a hard life basically. So I would assess it as they had a really hard life. They needed something. It was either going to be drugs, alcohol, or church. Mm-hmm. And for many, if they didn't start in church, they ended up in church because their life was bloody difficult, So I'm a child of the Windrush. And my mother, between both my mother and father, my father was he loved his marijuana, he loved his black, and he loved drinking excessively. He was a party animal. How he and my mum got together, my mum's like Mother Teresa, literally. I don't know how they got together. Obviously it was a sexual tension, and I don't know, but they were together. Now, my father insisted that his children, certainly his girls, went to church. So it was convenient that my mum had a strong faith. And as a result of that, I had no choice. From the age, as young as I remember, I was going to church. And one of the things that's very prominent in Black Pentecostal churches, which is linked to the African thing, is the music. They express their emotions through the music, through the drums, through the tambourines, all these percussive elements, stamping of the feet, clapping of the hands, it's all rhythmic, and of course singing. So by the time I was about 7, I was coming from, my father drank a lot excessively and smoked an awful amount. And the byproduct of that was a really nasty temper. So by the time I was 6, 7, I thought I was stupid, thick, ugly, useless. Because what came out of my dad's mouth was, you are ugly, you are stupid, you're going to amount to nothing. So throughout all of this, I'm going to church every Sunday. I was asked to sing. I don't know, it was probably Amazing Grace, I can't remember now, but I was asked to sing and I thought, oh God, I'm scared, I'm not going to do this. But I sang and everybody loved it. And that was the turning point for me. As I said, I was about 7, 8, and this big matriarchal black woman came to me afterwards. Her name was Missionary Campbell, and she said to me, don't you ever stop singing. That was amazing. And she had tears in her eyes. Oh, wow. The church was crying. And whilst I was singing, I realised, oh, right, this is all right. I'm not so stupid. Something's working. Somebody likes what I'm doing. This is working, mate. This is okay. I kind of like this. And that was the journey. That was my, if you like, the flame that ignited in me this secret passion for singing.
Mm-hmm. I asked this because this came up on the last interview I did, actually. Very similar thing in terms of a less than perfect background. The guy interviewed had been beaten by his father, and he talked about then when he did arrive in the music industry as a record company founder, he felt invincible because he came from Glasgow to London, and because he'd had such a tough hurdle to get through earlier in his life. He said the volume was turned down on other things that might freak out a lot of people, as in, talking to these big larger than life personalities and getting in there. How did you I mean, 7 years old is different. I mean, we're talking he was much older when he came, 20s when he came to London. Yeah. But as you continue through that journey, did you find that that background gave you a greater inner strength? Did it leave you
I think
vulnerable?
it totally gave me an inner strength. It gave me a grit. Because I believed, I think for me, which is different to this guy that you're talking about from Glasgow, I believed the voice of my father, which was, you are ugly, you are stupid, and you are going to amount to nothing. I believed it. And so I think as I got older and coming from a troubled home, education was difficult for me. I couldn't concentrate. I was a child that was full of fear. I was frightened to lift my hands up to give the answer just in case I looked stupid. So, and then of course as I got older, I was frightened to love because I wouldn't be loved. I was frightened that I was never going to be loved back. So this thing in me grew massively. But by the time I was in my 20s and I had come into London to make money as a singer. I had gone to college, teacher training, and the professor there, I failed my first year. The assignment that I put in came back at like 45 and I needed to get 47. And he said to me, Sarah, look, we all know that you want to sing. Why don't you just go and sing? And I thought, you know what? If I'm not going to do this teacher training, because I had the opportunity to go back and sit the paper. If I'm not going to do it, I'm going to have to give myself a 10-year plan here and assess how am I going to make money in the music. Because I was still singing. By that time, I was still singing with the inspirational choir, but I wasn't earning any money. I was just doing it because I loved singing and I loved the inspirational choir. It was who I was. But I was going to choir rehearsals with holes in my shoe. Yeah. So something needed to change, and I needed to tell my mum why was I leaving teacher training, which is a sensible, logical path that's going to lead to sensible money, to go into something fickle like singing, especially in the pop industry. Why? So I gave myself 10 years in which to stamp my mark, establish who the singers were, the backing singers who were earning good money. I established who they were, and I said, I listened to them, and I was like, I've been in the choir for many years. I can do just as good as you, even better. I wasn't a bitch, but I just knew it was a game of chess.
It's essential self-confidence.
Totally. And then it was, I suppose, me standing up within myself, the child standing up within and saying to that voice that's saying you're useless, saying you can get stuffed. I can sing and I'm going to sing. It's interesting because that was the thing that kept me going. That inner voice, when I came into London, I was like, I'm going to make it, I'm going to make money, and nothing's going to get in the way. As soon as I stepped into London, my first job was with Incognito. And I was with Incognito for 10 years. Sang on the albums, toured, world tour, Japan, Australia, Europe, the whole shebang. Stevie Wonder came on stage with us, loved us, joined us, blah, blah. Yeah. You know, it was just a road that was a beautiful, exciting, educational, musical road for me. And my inner being was being established. Musically, I was being established. And although that was happening for me, I still would say to myself, Sarah, you're no good. They're going to find out in a minute that you can't really sing. And they're going to ask you to leave. That voice was always going on in my head. Yeah. And it's only now that since working with Incognito, I've gone on to work with Roxy Music. I've gone on to work with, and then when I did the reunion for the Roxy, that was so successful because I wasn't singing as a section. I was singing as a singer beside Brian. I was ghosting all that Brian was doing. Most of what Brian was doing, I was ghosting. It was a phenomenal position for me and a great turning point, because then Simon Le Bon came to see the show, Jim Kerr came to see the show, and both those guys asked me to work for them.
Wow.
In the same capacity that I was working for Roxy. So it took me out of the section singing of backing singing, which there's nothing wrong with that, but I felt more comfortable. Deep down inside, I wanted to sing. And I think deep down inside, I was capable of singing within my own right, still backing, but just as one person.
Yeah.
And that journey, it was a major learning curve, you know, to sing ghost to ghost a giant like Brian Ferry.
It's pressure.
Proper hardcore pressure. And you better get it right, because that guy doesn't mess about. His timing is next to none. It's deliberate how he sings. Every single sentence. And you have to get that timing spot on. Top of Brian.
Yeah.
Don't mess about. So that, you know, so the springboard, if you like, from the choir, from inspirational choir, springing into Incognito, then springing from Incognito, an acid jazz band, which was like an underground cultish thing at the time, to then springing into working for Simply Red, then from Simply Red going straight to the Roxy, which was a major turning point. Then from Roxy, Brian held me on for a good 7 years. During Brian, I worked with Simon Le Bon in the same capacity. When Duran Duran reformed to come back, they asked me to come and do their arena dates in the UK. And it was all about, Sarah, look yourself in the mirror, and even though you might not believe it, you better dig deep and you better sing from your arse.
I was expecting Heartland.
Sing from your arse. And make sure you sing. And that has taken me to now I'm working with Simple Minds. Jim Kerr has been an absolute giant of an inspiration for me, and has teased me, and he looks at me and he looks into my soul and he's like, Sarah, I know you're a chicken, but look, get out there. Get out there and sing.
Is it a case of, it sounds to me like it's about not completely drowning out the lack of self-confidence that you touched upon, but just making sure that your ability and your confidence in your singing is louder than that? Is that
it's allowing the self-doubt to be there, but also allowing who I am, because I am part of that self-doubt, but allowing myself to understand the self-doubt. It's just there, but actually, Sarah, you've actually got talent. You can do this. You know, you've been doing it for many years, and you do know how to connect with your audience. You do know how to love your voice and how to heal yourself from your singing. Share with others. Share with others the truth, which is, yeah, I am insecure. And I do think any minute now someone's going to knock on my door and say, listen, you ain't that good. I do think Jennifer Hudson's going to say, listen, darling, you ain't that good. You can't sing as good as me.
I mean, that comes from a place of worse adversity than a lot of people might have to suffer. However, in this industry, I've seen every single person that I've met, no matter how talented, deep down they all have that.
This is what I understand now.
Imposter within them,
they
or what they feel to be an imposter, but it's really not. But we all suffer from that.
I love that. I love that title, imposter.
Yeah.
Because of course that's what it is. My father, I've forgiven him. I love him dearly. I celebrate the good parts of my dad, you know, and because of that, I'm able to accept what you're saying and understand where you're coming from. It's an imposter.
Yeah.
My dad spoke foolishly, and those words took root.
Yeah.
You know, but the root is an imposter, like a weed in the garden, and you have to just keep weeding it out. You know?
Really do, because you're right. That's a good analogy, because it continues as a cycle.
It does.
Isn't it?
Steve Webb was the same. I remember reading something about Steve Webb. It's Steve Webb, isn't it? The computer guy.
Oh, Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
You know, he had a similar vibe going on there in his head. You know, and it's like if these giants, as you say, have to deal with the imposter, then who am I? You just need to understand that it's going to be there. Each time that I go on stage with Simple Minds or anyone, but now I've been with Simple Minds for 12 years and I love every bit of it, and I feel like I'm a part of them now. And every time I go out, just before I'm stepping on stage, I feel the weight of responsibility, and I feel like, oh my God, I need to go to the toilet and have a proper colon extraction. Properly.
Yeah.
You know, out of control. And it's just who I am.
Yeah.
It's just who I am. It's never going to change. But I have to dance with it and know that when I'm in that, once I get on that stage, once I've rehearsed and I know what I'm doing, the imposter will be kicked to the ground.
Yeah. I think that's you know, it's one of the biggest themes that always comes up on this, and what so many people love to hear about in others, to remind them that we all have a degree of that.
Massively.
It varies from individual to individual.
Yeah.
But it's just there because, you know, I mean, and you're a professional too, so of course you get the fear, and otherwise complacency might be allowed to creep in.
Totally.
You know?
Totally.
Yeah, it's just, and
totally.
You know, it's the same anytime I get a new project and I look at a blank page, I'm sure that I've lost it every time. But,
yeah.
You know, but then the first mark of ink that goes down that I like,
you're in the flow. You're in the flow.
Yeah, completely.
You connect.
Yeah.
You connect with your greatness.
I
feel it's like connecting with my purpose, my vocation, and my vocation and my purpose is about my greatness, because my greatness, my vocation, my purpose makes me happy. This Mahalia Jackson project has been a torment, but it's also been like a piece of therapy, because my life has been, to go back to your original question, sorry I divulged there and digressed and all the rest of it, but my life was troublesome. My father beat my mum up in front of us as children, and he was a tormented soul, wanted to be back in Jamaica as the farmer that he was, you know, and didn't understand what it was to be an employee, because he was an employer in Jamaica, had his own land and was employing people to work his land. So he didn't do well. And that anger rose in that man. He was like a devil. And so we were poor. Both my parents worked around the clock, but we were poor. I would watch my father. He was given the best joints of meat. We were given the bone. But my mum was a brilliant cook. So the gravy on the potato was incredible. You know what I mean? A la carte every time. But I think that's where I understand Mahalia Jackson. Mahalia Jackson was born in 1911, 46 years after slavery. So although slavery was abolished, we all know in America and in this country, the racism, the segregation handed out to the blacks were, and still is today, disgusting. The poverty that the white counterparts were dealing with was not going to be anywhere as bad as the slaves, the black slaves, what they were dealing with. Mahalia was raised and lived until she was about 16, I believe, by the riverside of Mississippi, the Mississippi River, in a wooden shack. She lost her mother at 5, and she was raised by her very, very religious grandmother. so knew nothing but church. She didn't know how to be ambitious about work because blacks weren't encouraged. Although slavery was abolished, blacks were not encouraged. The majority of blacks were not encouraged to be ambitious, to become teachers, to become lawyers, to become entrepreneurs. She was going to be a housemaid.
Yeah.
She was going to iron the shirts and wash the nappies of these white children. And that's where she was heading. But Mahalia found comfort in her singing. And her faith, she was a faith-led woman, she depended on her faith to give her understanding and forgiveness to the white oppressors, if you like. Mm-hmm. She worked extensively with Martin Luther King. It's the peaceful route. And I believe that she found that energy, she found the conviction through her faith. So the passion and love that she had for singing, she discovered that she had a voice. Others discovered it. Other talented people discovered that Mahalia, by the time Mahalia was 16, was a beautiful singer and wanted to give her classical lessons. She said no. They also wanted her to sing blues and jazz in the saloons. She said no, because of her strong faith. And she could have been as big as Ma Rainey, Ma Bessie Smith, these big matriarchal jazz types. She could have been way as big as them.
And they inspired her, right? I was
they inspired her.
Learning about Mahalia.
They inspired Mahalia, and Mahalia took the inspiration, I guess, and took it back into church. The churches were, at that time, if you like, a holding pen for the obedient blacks. And the sound that was coming out of the Baptist church, if you like, was, so Amazing Grace would be, Amazing Grace. Mahalia would take Amazing Grace and sing it, Amazing Grace, how sweet. She took the blues. And blues was the pain of the slave. So what the white man turned blues into, you don't even hear blues. The white man said blues, but by the time Rolling Stones and all these other bands got hold of blues and turned it into whatever they've turned it into, blues is quite complex. When you listen to Blind Willie Johnson, he's splitting notes all over the place. Mm-hmm. It's not an easy forum. So she took this blues back, because Bessie Smith and Ma Rainey and these big singers, they weren't able to sing blues in the way that they wanted to sing blues because the white audiences didn't want to hear it that way. They were singing a more ragtime type of blues. So Mahalia Jackson had the ragtime thing, but she also said, you know what? I'm going to sing Amazing Grace the way that I know how it would have sounded on the slave ship. Because it came from the slave ship. The melody came from the slave ship. Mm-hmm. But the words were written by, is it something Newton?
Yes.
Is it John Newton?
John Newton.
Right, yeah. John Newton wrote it. But the melody he heard from the slave ship. Mm-hmm. So let me tell you, that melody is not going to be, it ain't. Mm-hmm. Because when you've got shackles around your ankles and it's cutting into you, and you've got shit all around you and it smells really nasty and you've got period smells coming out, you're not singing like that.
No.
I'm sorry, but you're not. So I feel my childhood, of course it wasn't like Mahalia's. It was nowhere near as rough as Mahalia's. But my childhood was rough.
But there are parallels. I mean, immediately, when you told me your story just now, my head was immediately going, oh my God, there are so many.
Totally.
I can see the correlation here.
Totally. I didn't, because my dad lacked confidence in himself. My dad couldn't read or write. He projected that onto his children, onto his sons, onto his daughters. And I, unfortunately, took it in, held on to it, and during my educational years, instead of enjoying it, I was frightened of it. And so when I left education, I had no ambition. I didn't believe that I could do anything better than clean or work in a factory, which is parallel to Mahalia. So the way that she found herself through her hymns, I found myself through my hymns. I wasn't allowed to listen to pop music. I wasn't allowed to sing pop music. So it was through the hymns at church where I found my voice and where I discovered comfort. And I loved, my father was playing reggae in the home. So I heard reggae. And he was playing early Aretha. So I heard Aretha. So I heard Mahalia and I heard Aretha and I heard reggae, Bob Marley. To be honest, I don't need to really hear much more. I found what made me happy. Yeah. And what inspired the soul in me to sing. I found it in those three things.
No, I mean, you can't powerful. Isn't a word that does it justice to what Mahalia Jackson would have had to go through in those times. Not just to mention the glass ceilings that you talked about in terms of things, those invisible things put in place, whether it's society or whether it's family that hold you down, that shut down the confidence in a fledgling person.
Yes.
But also, just like you said about the racial issues at the time, the environment she was growing up in, the poverty, there are so many reasons not to do what she did. Yeah. And that would be, even if she was to go and sing the blues, that would apply. But to not only do that, but to take that and stick to her guns with faith and to take that back into the church and go her own road.
And then the church say to her, see you later. She went to Chicago and she was singing on the street corners, hence the ability to project the way that Mahalia projected. I don't know that there was anyone as brilliant as her in projecting without a blinking mic. And that feverish way that she has about her, the rock and roll thing that she had in her, which obviously came from the Bessie Smiths and the ragtime that was going on. And she heard the jazz players in the saloon bars. She heard them. So she took that on her own with a piano player or an organ player and went into churches and sang. Yeah. Or she would just go in by herself because she was looking for churches to join. And often the churches that she would knock upon were just too tame. They were black churches, but they didn't want to hear the blues in her. They wanted to hear the stripped down, lovely, calm, white, accepted, Amazing Grace. Thank you very much.
So she was somewhere in between the two.
She was totally in between the two. She was totally in between the two. And they would throw her out. They'd throw her out.
Wow.
Throw her out.
When did you first become aware of Mahalia?
I became aware of Mahalia by the time I was about 9, because my eldest sister loved Mahalia Jackson.
And were you aware of her own struggles and parallels we talk about?
Not at all.
You don't at that age, I guess, do you?
Not at all. Not until it was, this project, the Mahalia Jackson project, has been in me for, as I said, for the last 20 years. And the imposter in me has been saying, Sarah, you cannot do this. You can't do it because you can't sing like Mahalia. You can't sing anywhere near as good. And I would think of other singers that I know. Hilda Campbell, she's a great gospel singer. I used to sing with her in the inspirational choir. She still sings today. Phenomenal. And I would think, I'm going to put this together and I'm going to get Hilda to sing it. Or I'm going to get Faye Simpson to sing it. Or I'm going to get anyone else, but not me. Fast forward from 20 years to now, what's happened? What's happened is Sarah's had a divorce. I lost everything. And so I felt that I had nothing to lose. And I didn't care who was going to laugh at me. And I don't care now who's going to laugh at me. I've got nothing to lose. I've lost the big 5-bedroom house in Tunbridge Wells. I've lost the husband. Do you know what I mean? Well, actually, that's gone. And so that's what's different. Now, it led me to think, what is it about Mahalia, Sarah? Why do you keep coming back to Mahalia? Simple Minds, in the first I've been working for them for 12 years, and this is the first year in 2019 that they've had a break, right? And in my career that spanned over 30 years, this is the first time I've taken a year off. And in this year, I've had to deal with my divorce, getting over my divorce, which was last year. And I just said, you know what, sod it. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this tribute to Mahalia Jackson. So in the process of taking it on, I had to sit down, listen to the interviews of Mahalia and listen to her talk so honestly and so innocently about her own journey. And it's just made me realise, Jesus Christ, I've got a lot in common with this woman. And I love her to bits. She's sensual, she's sexual, she's a woman of faith, complete faith. She will not be swayed. She accepts everybody, black and white. She's able to forgive. She's able to understand difference. That's me. That's me. I'm extremely trusting to a fault, actually. So why shouldn't I do Mahalia? And why shouldn't I take it on and give it the tribute from my expression, which is what I've done.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the project and what the plan is.
Well, the project, right, as I said, I did my first recording in 2011. I recorded a song called "It's in My Heart." This melody of love. His eyes is on the sparrow, which is a hymn, an old hymn that Mahalia sang. I recorded that with the fantastic Colin Good, who I met in Roxy Music. And I also recorded another track called "It's in My Heart, This Melody of Love Divine." And I recorded it, just me and piano. The treatment that I gave it, or that was given to it, I didn't like. It was recorded by a guy who was a DJ, and he sucked all the life out of the performance. And so my voice sounded really isolated to the piano, and I didn't like it. And so what it did was kick me back into the imposter land of Sarah, you're shit.
Right.
You can't do it. So hence now, 2019, I'm like, Sarah, get back on with it. Give it a treatment. And my whole thing, what I've decided to do is, where Mahalia listened to what was coming out of the saloons back in the 1920s and back in the 1925s and 30s, where she was listening to this, she took that into her solo performance. And what I've done, and the churches didn't like it. So what I've done, I've been like the imposter that was in Mahalia. The imposter that was in Mahalia was the rebellious, I'm gonna go, so move on up a little higher. I'm gonna move to the children of the ghetto. Yeah, I'm gonna move on up. That was a great song that she sang, and she recorded that. And that was the recording that done really well for Mahalia. I'm gonna move on up a little higher. And so what I've done is I have said, you know what? Take the upright bass, get the honky-tonk piano, get the organ, which would be the church side, and get the swing jazz of the drum. I've put those elements together with my expression, and what I have is a combination of what was going on in Mahalia's head when she was singing. And so if I want to strip it back to just piano and me, honky-tonk piano and me, I can. But for this body of work that I've done, it's upright bass, Tom Wheatley on upright bass, Colin Good on piano, Luke Smith as the organ player, and Jerome Brown, phenomenal drummer, on drums. And these expressions, so the jazz, the swing jazz of the drum comes together with the early jazz honky-tonk type playing of the piano, as Mahalia called it, the honky-tonk. That's what she heard coming out of the saloon bar. And the churches would look down on that music and say that's the devil's music. But she had that going on in her head. And you can hear it when she sings Move On Up a Little Higher. She's in the saloon bar. She's in the saloon bar, and she's more jazz and she's more sexy than Bessie Smith. Definitely more. And the church, in fact, they embraced her. Eventually they embraced her and she was singing to the masses. She wasn't just singing to the churches, because people who didn't go to church loved her rock and roll. They loved her blues. They loved her, the movement that Mahalia would bring into her performance, just standing there on her own with the piano. She was stamping her feet and she was clicking her finger and she was giving it that swing. I'm gonna move on up a little higher. Wait to the, it's all there. She's got that blues and she's got that, and her audiences. So by the time she was singing at Carnegie Hall, the first time they heard her, they didn't know whether they were on foot or horseback, because it was like, Jesus Christ, what's this? What's this? This black woman in front of me, big breasts, small waist, big ass, big mama, and she's gone from the church covering her up in a gown, which is what they used to do. They would put her in a gown because it would cover up a Rubenesque figure. Because when she would move, she's giving it the... She was moving and everything was... So her breasts were going from left to right. Yeah. The hips were swinging from left to right in opposite directions. And she was a big, beautiful, Rubenesque, lovely voice coming out of this dark, gorgeous woman. She was giving it some in church. So, of course, the church was like, oh, my God, we've got to cover this up.
Yeah.
But by the time then she started earning...
Best bits of humanity.
Proper. Cover it up. Cover. Typical of the church.
Yeah.
So the church now, she's outgrown the church, if you like, because it's not just the church that wants her. It's the open market that wants her. It's Carnegie Hall. It's the rich man that can afford to go to Carnegie Hall that wants her.
The CV of venues is incredible, isn't it?
Absolutely. The Royal Albert Hall. She was the first black woman to sing at the Royal Albert Hall. Did you know that?
Only because you told me. And
there is a picture of her now at the Royal Albert Hall.
Wow.
Yeah. Mahalia Jackson.
I'm right.
And then... in front of the Queen, Buckingham Palace. Her journey took her, and her conviction. And the reason why I want to do the tribute to Mahalia is because for all of those youngsters today on Britain's Got Talent, The Voice, all of these kind of shows where young people today are, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, are looking for fame. Yeah. Rather than wanting to connect. Mahalia wanted to connect. She had a vocation, she had a purpose, and her purpose was to sing and to sing her story.
And it's fueled by feeling and instinct.
Fueled by that.
And everything that was dear to her, not what she felt was wanted of her.
Not what she felt.
I think what you hit upon with talent shows.
Totally. The whole talent show thing. If you're not careful, guys, whoever's listening, you can become a puppet and you can become extremely unhappy. And before you know it, you're hooked on drugs, you're hooked on alcohol, because that's what you need to get through. Mahalia didn't need that to get through.
You were looking for something that you once felt very purely.
Yes.
And you've done everything that goes against that because you've been led by what you feel.
By the machine.
The
machine to make money. And for me, what's lovely here... Jim and Charlie, I owe them so much because they have looked at me, they've looked into my soul and they're like, Sarah, it's okay. Just do this. We've got you. And they have got me because I work in Simple Minds. I love it. I get paid. I can come back and I can do a project like this, and I can pay musicians, great musicians like Colin Good, Tom Wheatley, Luke Smith and Jerome Brown. These are top musicians in the UK, and because of Simple Minds I can pay them. And I've got Pete Walsh who's going to be mixing the album for me. Pete Walsh is the great man that worked on Simple Minds. Pete Walsh is a giant. He's a giant, and he is going to be working on my album. And he loves the concept. I've had nothing but goodwill shown to me for the making of this album, and it makes me humble. And it doesn't just make me humble, it's tapped into the child that was abused. It's tapped into the child that was told you were useless, you're ugly, and you're going to amount to nothing. And what it's done, it's healed me from within, and it's made me realize, Sarah, run with this. Run with it. And if you don't earn £50, run with it and love it. Love every single second of it. And that's what I'm doing. I'm enjoying it. I'm loving it in the same way that Mahalia loved it.
Yeah, well, I think everything you said there about the feeling and the way Mahalia channeled everything that she experienced, that she felt, that she wanted to do on her terms.
On her terms.
Would it be fair to say, because you said that you've had this project in you for 20 years,
yeah,
but we've also spoken about the fact that you're doing this now at this stage of your career.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be fair to say that it had to be this way, that you had to go through all the things
I had to lose everything. I had to lose everything.
To do it with feeling in a way that is right for not just a Mahalia, I don't know if tribute's the right word, but for you, as a musician.
Totally. The parallel here is that Mahalia had nothing. Mm-hmm. I had nothing. I was a working class girl. I gave myself a 10-year plan in order to become successful. How I measured success was I would be able to buy myself a Mercedes car and buy myself a Georgian house. That's exactly in the 10th year, and that the artists would call me. And in the 10th year, that's exactly what happened. I had the money to buy myself a Mercedes. I could buy myself a 5-bedroom early Victorian house, and I was being called. Jim Kerr called me for this job. Brian Ferry called me, and who was the other? And Simon Le Bon called me. I auditioned over the phone with Simon Le Bon. I gave myself a 10-year plan. So I worked really hard. Yeah. And I worked to acquire all I had. And I thought to myself, okay, as a working class girl, my husband wasn't earning as much as me, but it's okay. We can make it work. We can make it work. It doesn't matter. If he's not working, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Sarah's the working class girl, that spirit's in me. Fine. What happened? I lost everything. So here I am. I've got Jack. Mm-hmm. I had properties. I lost it all. So what have I got to lose? I was the same as Mahalia. I'm the same as Mahalia. Mm-hmm. I've got Jack to lose. Mm-hmm. I've got everything to gain here. And that's what am I gaining? My stability, my inner strength, and a total and utter belief in my faith. Mm-hmm. I believe in my God, and I believe that my
foundations,
God,
you've gained the real,
I've understood
keystones of happiness.
Yeah, I have. It's not about. I'm now in a relationship with someone who I have nothing. He has very little, but what we do have, I have belly laughter with him. Yeah, I laugh from the foot up, and he encourages me.
And out of that place comes beautiful things that will bring you what you want.
Totally,
to get out to the other side. And
totally.
Is that? It sounds like an obvious question, but is that something that you channeled into the work, that adversity and that kind of pursuit of those wholesome things in terms of the singing and the recording and the preparation? Is that something that you...
Is that something that I've channeled
access
into?
With feeling, yeah.
Yeah, completely. If I understand you right, have I channeled all that I am and learnt from into this body of work? Absolutely. This has been a journey archetype for me. I remember learning about the journey archetype at college, and exactly what's happened. When I started in the inspirational choir, I was coming up to London, Islington, with holes in my shoes. Mm-hmm. My mother had divorced my father. We were living in a battered wives hostel with me and my 2 brothers and my mum. When we opened the door to our bedroom, because we all, for a year, we lived in one bedroom together. And when we opened up the door to that bedroom, there was human feces on the beds in the room. Wow. And I clung to my faith then. That was something that took me through that very difficult time. I had to watch my mum cry, go to work, come back, cook food for us, and we eat in that bedroom. We washed in the bedroom for a whole year. And my faith developed from that time. I came away from my faith as I became more successful and I earned money, and I came away from my faith. But then when I lost everything with my husband and the divorce, it's brought me back to my faith. And it's just taken me to a place where I'm at the beginning of my singing career. I'm at the beginning of the early stages of my voice. And that journey coming right back has led me to Mahalia Jackson. It was Mahalia Jackson that I was listening to at 7, 8, 9, 10. And now, at the ripe, beautiful age that I'm at, I'm now again really not just listening to Mahalia, but learning about her and understanding just how close our paths have been. I understand the woman. I totally understand her.
And that's why it's absolutely crucial to fight through whatever challenges are put there, because look at that legacy that Mahalia has left, and
man.
Surely the idea that through your work now that you can shine an even greater light on Mahalia and maybe bring her to an audience that isn't yet aware of her, young people today,
completely.
And give them the courage and strength that Mahalia gave to you. That
Absolutely.
must be an incredible feeling.
This month, I think it's on the 15th, I'm giving a talk at ACM. It's a college here in London. It's a college here in London called ACM. I'm just going to see if I can, ACM. I can't even remember what it stands for now, but basically, I'm giving a talk. The Academy of Contemporary Music, and the big college is in Surrey, and there's another college here just over in Clapham Common. Last year they invited me to give a talk, and they've invited me back. And wherever I can talk about the artist, getting in touch with who you really are and not comparing yourself to Beyonce, Jennifer Hudson, Mariah Carey, Spice Girls, take that. Be who you are. For so long, I was running away from who I am. And I've been very lucky because Brian Ferry looked me in the face and said, "What are you doing here?" pretty much. Mick Hucknall looked me in the face and told me, "Sarah, you're good." The next prophet is Jim Kerr. And Charlie Burchill. Both of those guys are prophets in my life. God has put them in my life for a reason. I believe that. Whether you believe in God or not, the universe then, I'll use that language, the universe has put those people in my life for a reason. And those people have said to me, "Sarah, come on. There's more to you that you can do here." And it's forced me to look myself in the mirror and really look at who's there. Not comparing myself to anybody else, but look at who's there and take what little gold is there and work within the constraints of that.
There's more than a little gold.
Massively. But the fact that
I've fantastic energy.
Well, the fact that I've tapped into my seed, the shell, which is the limitation, has bust open. That's what's happened here. And I am growing, and I'm in the process, and I can feel that I'm growing. And I now don't need my husband. I thought I needed him. I don't need the 5-bedroom house. What I need is my purpose. I need my vocation. I need this kind of unhoned gifting that's within me that makes me happy. And I can say to any of those students, when I go to talk to them on the 15th of this month, I will be saying, this is who I am. For years, I thought that I was nothing. I thought that my gifting compared to others was so small, it was insignificant. And all I could do was stand behind the likes of Simply Red, Simple Minds, Roxy, Stevie Wonder. Stand behind them. But what my God, my faith, my purpose, my gifting has taught me through Mahalia is that my gift is a precious, beautiful piece of rare gold. And I have discovered it. And because I've discovered it, I know I'm rich.
Big thank you to Sarah Brown for taking the time to sit down and blow me away with such an incredible, inspiring story. So I hope you go and take a listen to I'm On My Way Today. It's out to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the passing of the Queen of Gospel Music, Mahalia Jackson. Sarah is the epitome of what we can be when we find our way in life, and we find our way to believe in what we're doing and what we're passionate about, what we're good at, what comes to us and feels damn good. And I hope you found yours. And if you haven't, and if it doesn't feel that good, change it, go and find it, make it work. It might take years, but I hope Sarah's story will remind you that it is more than worth it. So Sarah's going to be back on the road before too long with Simple Minds if you want to see her do that stuff too. What a story. I mean, I've been desperate to release this thing for 3 years now, and I'm really glad I waited until I did, because, well, you know, it had to be that way because it was only going to be to promote Sarah's work. But there were times when I really thought about just splurging it out there, because I just, you know, I couldn't bear the idea of it not seeing light of day. Such a powerful conversation. So thanks again to Sarah. Thank you for listening. I hope you're well. I hope you're staying creative. Get us hit up at Ben Tallon on the social media. I want to hear your story. I will share your work. I will consider you for the podcast. So let me know. Give me a little message. hello@bentallon.com. Have a great week, guys. Thank you to the sponsors, illustrationx.com, the AOI, the Association of Illustrators, the AOI.com. Enjoy the rest of your week. Don't forget to check out the thread I mentioned at the top of the show on my Twitter, pins to the top of my tweet in a minute, and also check out the article on Creative Review about focus and creativity. Have a good one, guys. Nice one. We'll see you very soon.